Before we start, I have to apologise for something. Last episode, I said that the Hock Tour girl is named Hayley Welsh. This is not true. Her surname is actually Welch with a CH at the end. I'm not here to make excuses for my actions. I told Zac, Bruno and you, the listener, that her surname is Welsh with the full knowledge that that is false. I am deeply sorry for my irresponsible actions. I promise to do better if you will afford me a second chance, and I am prepared to be held to account if I ever again betray your trust and confidence in me. Thank you for hearing me out. Hello and welcome to Davis on Davis, the show all about Russell T Davies and the TV shows he has made. And we're at a pretty incredible point because we are reviewing the final episode of the final thing he did before Series 1 of Doctor Who. Joining me as ever is Zac Copeland-Green. Hello, Zac. How are you doing?
Hello. It's great to be here again on another episode. I say that I'm saying this like I'm not on every single episode. I'm the house guest that refused to leave. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, isn't it, that we're on the cusp of Doctor Who, and part of me is like, I can't wait to discuss Christopher Eccleston's theories of Doctor Who, and that's when Louis looks at me and gives me the eyes and says, "No, that's not the point of the podcast." Interestingly enough, we talk in the studies of early Greek philosophy about how the term pre-Socratics is a bad term because many of the pre-Socratics were contemporary of Socrates and not before him. I believe Casanova was airing at just about the same time as the first series of Doctor Who. So we're sort of almost in a way running parallel.
Well, I think this might have been February 2005, and then
This was March.
Okay, so it certainly ended before Series 1 of Doctor Who.
I should know these. Okay, I'm with you. Okay, so this obviously Casanova was a 3-part television series when it broadcast in the UK, airing on the 13th of March, the 20th of March, and the 27th of March. The first episode of 2005 Doctor Who, Rose, aired on the 26th of March. Therefore, there was a single day where you could say both Doctor Who and Casanova were on the air.
Wow.
Wouldn't you like to know?
Isn't that crazy?
So think about when people were watching what we are talking about in the latter half of today's episode, many of those people will have seen Christopher Eccleston grab Billie Piper's hand and run down Westminster Bridge to fight the Nestine consciousness. Isn't that crazy?
It makes you think, but yeah, like, we've sort of worked our way up to, this kind of the present for any Doctor Who fan. I say that in the same way that, like, 1950 is the present to anyone who, like, knows about, like, nuclear science, because that's the point at which, like, sort of all the carbon dating breaks down because of all the nuclear testing. So it's sort of like the start of a kind of a modern era where the world is irreparably changed by the coming of new Doctor Who. We've reached that point.
Yeah, exactly. And Russell T Davies now is out of the box and we can't put him back in, namely because he's too tall.
But before we get into that, let's recap what we've done since we last did this podcast. So, Zac, do you want to go first?
I can do. It's been a few days, he says, reversely hyperbolic, since we last recorded, and I've done many things, but most notably was the thing I did this time yesterday. I saw Wicked, Louis.
Wow.
And how was it, you might ask? Part of me wants to say it was wicked, but I actually would curl up into a ball at how cringy that was. I genuinely, I was about 20 minutes in, and I just thought to myself, I'm going to rewatch this film for every year for the rest of my life. And I don't think a film has come out in my lifetime that I remember seeing in the cinema and thinking that very thought. I just thought instant classic all round.
Okay, so it's good.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that because it's
okay,
it's
good.
bad.
Gotcha.
No.
No, it's just you say, like, I could say it's wicked, and I was like, so why don't you?
No, I just wow. I absolutely mean, by no means perfect. I just want to say, a couple of things that maybe I would have changed myself, but I just think the performances from Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande were just phenomenal. Obviously, the story, I went into Wicked with a very limited knowledge, I haven't seen the stage show. So I was sort of going in with, I know the song Popular and I know the song Defying Gravity, and I know it's going to subvert my expectations of the story of The Wizard of Oz. I didn't understand just how interesting the story was and the novel that it's based on, how clever that is in retelling the story and questioning what is good and what is bad and looking at fascism. Basically, everyone's interested in looking at fascism, but basically painting the Wizard of Oz as a fascist leader. Wow, so interesting. That's not a spoiler, by the way. I think that's kind of
what it's about.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it is a spoiler, this is only part one anyway. So.
Yeah, exactly. You don't there's a moment towards the end where Elphaba realizes that the wizard has no real power.
You mean towards the middle?
Well, towards the end of part one, which would be in the musical probably like exactly halfway through, where she's like, "You have no real power." And I'm sort of sat there going, that must be really difficult to sort of play as a moment and direct as a moment, because it's clear to 99% of the audience from the very word go that Oz the Great and Powerful is not great or powerful.
He's like a snake oil salesman from Kansas or whatever it is in the movie.
I think...
In the original movie.
Yeah, I think Wicked kind of follows the same thing that... do you remember there was a bad film with James Franco, and it was like a mere...
the Oz prequel.
Yes, that was supposed to spawn a film franchise and then never did, and he's a sort of travelling... I think he's like a circus, close-hand magician kind of thing, and that sort of leads into the vision of the Wizard of the Oz as a master of theatre and performance, and that's how he can trick people into believing that he's magical. Wicked sort of follows the same thing from the implications I got in the small details. But I'm going to go and read the book. I'm going to go and see the stage musical in London, I think, and then can't wait for next November. I'm just, wow. I've just been listening to the soundtrack non-stop for the last 24 hours. It's ridiculous.
Very nice, very nice.
What about you, Louis? What have you been up to?
So I did something which I think was kind of a long time coming. I took somewhat of a pilgrimage to a site that I think anyone who's listened to the pod will know has a lot of significance, and I even went there with someone who until then I'd mainly only really been seeing online. I'm of course talking about Preston bus station, where I went with my friend Dylan. But while I was up there, I also went to Canal Street with Zac. In the day to take photos. I did go to Manchester. I did go out at night in Manchester, but I can never go out 2 nights in a row. So it was just a nice, chill, fun day. Yeah, but yeah, it was great to see you.
It was lovely, and we even saw a real highlight for me. We walked past the bridge, that's not on Canal Street. That's in Deansgate Locks. That, oh my god, all the names are flying out my window. Where Vince has his phone taken off him by the accountant that he's kind of dating and thrown into the water during that one episode of Queer as Folk.
Yeah.
That very famous bridge.
Yes.
Everyone listening knows exactly what I'm talking about and loves that bridge as much as I do.
Yes. That was good. And turns out the friend who I was staying with in Manchester works like within view of that bridge. So
wow. Some people don't know how good they have it.
Yeah. Manchester really felt like a city just so full of life. Everyone there was so lovely. No wonder a young Welsh guy went here once and became Britain's greatest TV writer.
I mean, you can really tell why this city has an allure for creatives and people that want to tell stories. London is obviously so cliche, so overdone. I think Manchester may be on the verge of it becoming a second London, and people may be starting to think, oh, it's overdone. But I really think there's something special in the water, and that's not just because we essentially get Buxton water from our taps. I mean, obviously I live here, so I'm very biased, but I love it.
Hey, it's before going, obviously a lot of hype had been created by doing this podcast and by speaking to other people I know, but like it actually lived up to it, and not everywhere does. So yeah, very happy about that. I will be back before long.
Woo! The crowd goes wild.
Let's yeah. But now let's go to another place to be, which is Venice. Oh, wait, no, he got exiled from Venice. There's the segue. Today we're talking about Casanova episode 2. In episode 1, he took Venice by storm, was scandalous, was romantic, got the love of his life, immediately lost her, escaped from prison, but had to flee Venice. And the thing about this episode is he never makes it back. It's a bit of a spoiler, but like...
I was going to say massive spoilers, yeah. Is that a tragedy or is that an arc for Casanova?
Well, I don't know, because the idea is that it's all about the journey. And by the end, because, we still have old Casanova in a castle in what is now the Czech Republic, he gives us this whole story of his travels all across Europe. But it's like, Ben, he never feels like a failure because he never made it back to Venice. But also, this was his kind of journey the whole time, was to waltz into every major city and just do something scandalous and maybe cause a French Revolution. We'll get to that.
We will. Yeah. I say arc and question that because we start this sort of second half of the show with Casanova with a very clear aim, which is to get back to Venice. And to do so, he needs to find a sort of a Venetian ambassador in one of the great courts across Europe who will have the power to essentially forgive him of all his crimes so that he can waltz back into Venice no longer a fugitive and sort of claim back Henriette in... he hasn't yet decided how he's going to do that, but that is his sort of driving force. It's, of course, sort of slightly complicated with the introduction of a brand new character into the drama, because Casanova is going to be joined again by Rocco, but also now by Giac, his son, by one of the nuns that he has hooked up with previously in the past. Whether or not it's one of the two nuns we saw him hook up with previously, because we did see a couple of scenes of him getting naughty with some nuns, but essentially Giac's mother died, and with him being a bastard, illegitimate child.
It's period appropriate language.
The convent can no longer hold on to Giac, so Giac is sort of sent off with his father. So Casanova now has this additional burden. I say burden, that's an interesting choice of words for me. I'm going to stick by it. He has this burden that he sort of takes on as a responsibility of having this sort of 10-year-old boy follow him around as he tries to get back to Venice.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of new status quo. Giacomo Casanova, his main man, his best friend, his manservant Rocco, and then this kid who doesn't speak, he doesn't say anything, which is interesting because that's a lot like Giacomo Casanova himself when he was young. I think we're going to call the kid Giac, and we're going to call the man Casanova, just to distinguish them.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's more, he's more than a little bit like, there are multiple points throughout this episode where Giac is shown to be a direct parallel to Casanova, and Casanova has a moment where he reflects on his own childhood and how terrible his father was, and how he's going to be an inspiration to his son. He's going to be so much more, and he's going to show this kid, make him so proud of his father. There's a funny moment where they're sort of walking through the streets talking about this.
Yeah, and he's saying all of this stuff.
And sort of Giac is having shit thrown on him. Gets covered in water.
Because he's like dawdling behind. He's always in the way of the piss pot or the bucket of shit that's getting thrown out of the door. Just because, this is pre-plumbing, so that's what happened on the streets.
Which is an example of one of the great moments of physical comedy that this episode has.
What's for stunt coordination if you're having all this happen to a kid?
I'm going to tell you the producer and the production manager definitely had some proper paperwork to fill out about how much water you can douse a kid in before they get hypothermia. Or maybe not. It was 2005 or /2004 when they actually made this. Maybe no one cared about child welfare or indeed animal welfare to have a dog chasing a child around.
Yeah.
So there's that sort of ironic parallel that we see crop up again. If I can briefly mention, there is a moment where later on Casanova is having sex and little Giac peers through the crack in the door to watch his father, which is a direct copy of a scene from the very beginning of the previous episode, as if to say, look, another Casanova is being made here, only for that then to manifest in a completely different way towards the end. And I will save that discussion for the end, the shocking end of the episode. But sort of, we know from the moment that we're introduced to Giac, the fact that he's given his father's name, and there's all these parallels, we go, oh, okay, there's some interaction here between Giac and the story of Casanova. How's it going to turn out?
Yeah, like he's either going to become his father or become like the complete opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no in between.
But what is the complete opposite of Casanova? I suppose we'll have to find out. And we'll have to define what Casanova is before we can even define the opposite. We're really getting philosophical here today.
Yeah. I was wondering if you had an answer to that, or I was just going to list off every other character until you said...
I do have an answer to that, and I think an answer is played with towards the end of this episode. But again, I'll savor that, because it comes towards the end. It's basically the denouement of the series, is understanding who Casanova is and what Casanova wants to be.
Yeah.
So we're at the point where we've got Casanova, we've got Rocco, we've got Giac, and they're off to find a Venetian ambassador, and the first place they decide to go is Gay Paris.
Is that a thing, Gay Paris? What?
Yeah, Gay Paris. As in gay as in happy, as in everyone loves to be in Paris.
Cool. Thought you were just throwing just gay.
No, absolutely. Google it. It's a very, very common saying. It's gay spelt Gai, apparently.
Okay.
Not Gay.
Wow.
Although, Paris is quite fruity.
Yeah, so they get to Paris. Immediately we're like, okay, he needs to like pretend to be the count of some place, a title, so he can get an audience with the ambassador. And so he goes for the Chevalier of Sautoy or something.
He bases the name off the River Seine, and it's the du Senegal, I believe.
Senegal. There we go. Yeah, but when he's saying this, I think someone misinterprets it as Seville or something.
Yes.
So he just rolls with that, which is quite funny. Yeah, and when he's sort of entering the court, there's a great moment. Someone says, "You speak very good French, by the way." Casanova's like, "Thank you. How's my accent?" And then the guy's like, "Well, Italian, obviously, but the ladies might like it. This is all spoken in like RP English. They both have the exact same accent to us." And I thought, this is a certified translation matrix moment. It's like when they made it's the opposite of when they made Vincent van Gogh Scottish, so that he would think that Amy Pond was Dutch. You remember that?
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah. It's like here they all have the exact same accent, but the audience is being told that they are different accents.
Yes. This episode, I couldn't help but think, God, it's goofy. It just does really goofy things in these little set pieces, because this Casanova coming to a court becomes a set piece that sort of gets played with and repeated. One particular detail we get is the first thing we see when we come to Paris, the court of Louis XV, is a poodle. Hold on to that image. And
also when he enters the court, everyone is like sort of dancing around in this kind of ballroom thing. Is this the court? Is that what courts do? Or?
Well, it's what we've come to expect from Venetian life.
Yeah.
And sort of Casanova settles in very quickly, and everyone's sort of going, "Oh, aren't you marvellous?" And he's made up this place, Senegal, which, by the way, is a real title that Casanova made up and called himself the Chevalier de Senegal.
That's very good.
It's interesting how throughout this episode there's some stuff that's very, very real that you wouldn't expect, and there's some stuff that is completely made up that you wouldn't expect either to have been made up. And people sort of play along with him because he's so handsome, both the girls and the boys.
Yes.
Oh yes, I've been there. Oh yes, it's very sunny this time of year. This place is completely pulled out of his arse.
A guy says, "Oh, bugger me, you're handsome." And he says, "Yes, I am." And "No, I won't." Dead.
Who turns out to be the Venetian ambassador. The Venetian ambassador is hitting on Casanova. Bellino is also there because she's on her grand tour, touring around. There's a great bit. I remember Louis last time absolutely suggesting we talk about the cinematography of this show, where the lighting changes, particularly when he's talking to Bellino. Weirdly, I think it starts with very warm lighting and then becomes cold white, or is it the other way around?
It's very like white. I think it becomes warm
And then switches back
when they're talking, because it's as if they're...
Yes.
But also it's like, I wonder if like sort of this is sort of an abstract representation of the court, because if everyone's sort of dancing around very vigorously, then when we get to her, it sort of goes dark. It's like maybe this is a metaphor for how it was like in the court. Because when we get to, for example, the London court later, that is people sitting around and talking, which you would expect.
Yes. Yeah.
But here it's all dancing.
I think you're very right. This entire show sort of strays away from representing things literally, and maybe that's a really creative way of getting behind solving the problem of being a low budget production, because obviously this is made by a Red Production Company, Nicholas Schindler's Manchester-based company.
Yeah.
Basically everything they've done so far has been Manchester-based modern-day drama. Here they're producing a period drama. Period dramas cost 3 times as more per minute than a sort of a contemporary drama. So here, that sort of abstraction, I think that's the perfect word to use, Louis, has been their way of getting around and sort of going, okay, it looks very silly and goofy, but it's sort of sticking to this quite camp style. So it's got this camp sort of shift in lighting, so it becomes very warm when he's talking to Bellino, and Bellino's successful, but obviously Casanova can't just sort of stick with her because she's going off on her own journey. And we see that she's got a sort of a little daughter now as well. She's going off on her own path. And then Casanova speaks to the Venetian ambassador again, and then has to confess that he's actually Casanova, and he's come to be pardoned for his crimes. And that's when everyone's like, oh my God, you're Casanova. And everyone's talking about Casanova because he's now this famous figure. And he's in his element, and then all of a sudden he gets kicked out of the court for lying about who he is. So he's not sort of just breezed his way in to go back to Venice through the ambassador's pardon. He's going to need to do something else to sort of make his fortune and muddy his way through life, which is where he goes next. And Rocco sort of suggests these various options. What are you good at, Casanova? And this is a conversation I have with myself in the mirror every night when deciding where on earth my career is going. The options he gives are... I forgot what the first option was off the top of my head. Number 2 is teaching. It's...
I didn't remember this bit because I just focused on what he actually does end up doing.
Well, the point is he sort of gives these options, and he's sort of juggling oranges to say, you've got options 1, 2, and 3 of the various things that you're good at in your life.
Then there's some very 2005 CGI.
And those balls with numbers on get bigger numbers on until all of a sudden I'm like sat there going, this looks like I'm watching the lottery in 2005. And what do you know? That's the moment we see Casanova invent the lottery.
Yes, it becomes him like proposing the lottery to the king, which turns out actually happened, which is pretty incredible. Actually, another thing before we go further, Rocco says, there's one line, a great line, these French are crazy. They should have the same coin everywhere right across Europe. Much easier. Thing is, that was quite a contemporary concept in 2005 because it had only been introduced 4 years earlier.
I was going to say, this is part of what this episode leans into, that goofiness of it becomes so sort of playful in breaking the fourth wall and talking about contemporary 2000s life, because the introduction of the way that Casanova sells the lottery is so silly. I don't know if you remember. He does the whole sort of, you've got to be in it to win it.
No, yes, he says he crosses his fingers, which you may remember as the National Lottery logo. And like when he was doing all of that, I thought, wow, Russell is not pulling his punches. They just got away with this, because I think he also says, oh, and you could donate some money to good causes. And then the king is like, no. And he's like, no, okay, that's fine. Just as long as he gets sort of 10%, he's happy.
It's interesting that so this is based off the historical fact that Casanova did become rich in Paris by introducing the lottery. He didn't, however, invent the lottery.
No.
It's presented in the show that he came up with that idea during that orange juggling scene with Rocco. In reality, it's believed that it was invented elsewhere, and it was his idea to introduce it in Paris.
Yeah. No, it certainly existed a century earlier. No, it'll have been 2 centuries earlier because it was under Elizabeth I in Britain. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if maybe on such a big scale, like a national lottery, if that was sort of the real innovation. That's how he gets rich, and that's how he enters like French nobility and becomes more and more accustomed to what it means to be a French noble at presumably the best time to be a French noble. I reckon. Je pense.
It does, obviously, the episode plays with this idea of the fact that Casanova is just so ridiculously lucky that lucky / intelligent that he manages to get away with so much. He becomes a noble in France on the cusp of the revolution, but doesn't get his head chopped off because, as we see, he departs Paris.
Yes.
Just before. So it's pretty genius the way that...
But the thing is, that's because he gambles all of his money and loses all of his money. Mm. He does something stupid and it quite literally saves his neck.
Exactly, yeah.
Because like we see these like cutaways to these characters we've been following in Paris in the guillotine, and it's like, oh, no, that's the one Casanova was having sex with and counting in French with, and now she's gone. She's donezo.
Can we talk about this? This was another one of those 2000s references. We have Casanova says to Rocco he's off to have his French lessons, and he goes off to have sex with a woman, by which French lessons he means he's counting his thrusts in French. He then proceeds to have 69 and say 69 in French.
Yeah.
I've just written down 69, and my French is somewhat lacking. It would have been...
69.
There we are. Then he has ménage à trois. So he sort of counted to 69 and then gone back to 3. And then my favourite, 12 points, which obviously is Russell T Davies going, that one's for the gays. That little Eurovision reference right there.
Yeah. Do you know that 69 is the last sensible French number? Because you know what comes after 69?
It's 610. 60-10.
Yeah, 70, exactly. And that's their word for 70. And you go to any other French-speaking country, apart from Quebec, they do also do it. But you go to like Belgium or Switzerland, and they're like, no, it's 7 ans, 8 ans.
Exactly,
no,
yeah,
no, easy peasy.
It's just, it's the French that sort of don't have any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, but right before, I'm sort of jumping about a bit because I'm just talking about the interesting things.
Oh, yeah.
We see that despite the fact that Casanova now has his Euro millions, see, you can play at this game, Russell, his son sort of still hasn't spoken throughout this episode so far, and Casanova sort of presents all his achievements, the fact that he's written a book, the fact that Voltaire has written a lyric about him, the fact that Casanova's written an opera for people with a lisp, so it's got no S's in. The boy Giac just will not say anything. He won't say he's proud of him, and Casanova just doesn't know what to do. And Rocco suggests maybe it's because all he does is talk about himself, and Casanova sort of says, well, I don't.
Who else is there? Yeah.
I don't have anyone else to talk about.
No, yeah.
So we sort of getting this insight into Casanova has set us about this mission to show his son that he can have a father that he can be proud of.
Definitely.
That he's completely oblivious to what actually makes a father that you should be proud of, and a father that's interested in. It's at this moment that scene I mentioned earlier where Giac witnesses Casanova having sex with a woman that we then begin to see, okay, Giac is absorbing the type of father that Casanova is and is internalizing that, and he's not getting the upbringing that he needs.
Exactly, but it's also at this point that Casanova learns that Henriette is now with child, and so she is never going to leave Grimani. Even if she doesn't love him, even if Casanova is rich beyond everything and comes back to Venice, now she will care about her kids and she'll want to protect them, and so she'll stay put with Grimani. And so he realizes that like he's really as far away from her as possible at this point. And also he can't connect with his son. And I think this is what pushes him back into like being sex Casanova and jumping back into the hedonism he's so well known for. And then of course that's when young Giac sees him in the act.
Yeah, exactly.
Then we get an interesting scene, and this is sort of kind of a last thing we see before he has to flee France, and that is that there's an execution, but it's like a special private viewing execution because this is someone who tried to kill the king, and so he needs to be executed, and these nobility are able to say, "Oh, we managed to get his execution be done at our place just for our enjoyment." Basically, it's sort of a private viewing of that, and the way they do it is by like skinning him while keeping him conscious the whole time, skinning him very slowly, killing him, and so Casanova is like it's all a bit drawn out, all a bit inefficient. You want something with a bit more, and then he literally does like a guillotine like motion, or like a one blade coming down. Which, to be fair, obviously beheading already existed if you remember the Tudors, but the fact that his mind is going to that. I wrote in my notes, is this motherfucker about to invent the guillotine? Is that where this is going? And not quite, because instead he just sort of escapes the French Revolution rather than, managing to charm his way into being one of the, whatever the commoners were called back then, the proletariat. He doesn't manage to sort of charm his way into being on like the winning side of a revolution, despite having just been nobility, by inventing the guillotine. But he still sees it coming.
Yes, and we cut back to the old Casanova with Edith, and Casanova hypothesizes that he might have actually been the one to cause the revolution through the introduction of the lottery, because by giving a peasant the taste of sort of a life-changing bit of money, he sort of started to allow people to question the status quo and whether the class system was right.
It's not ordained.
I do think that's a Russell T Davies sort of bit of questioning. Unless, of course, I mean, I'm not a historian, but from the brief bit of research I've done, no one has seemed to make the link there, I think.
Oh, no, absolutely not. And Edith straight away says, like, oh, and I'm guessing you also started the 30 Years' War, because that's more... What is it when historians agree on something? There's more of a consensus for it is more about the 30 Years' War. And also, I think another example is the fact that they gave a lot of money to the rebels for the American Revolution. That meant that they didn't have much money in France. They gave America life at the cost of their death. They gave up the monarchy just to spite the British, basically.
And speaking of the British, so we see, as we've mentioned, Casanova gambles everything he owns in Paris away. Now, interestingly enough, you've described that as him being unlucky. I almost question the older Casanova presents it as he kind of knew what he was doing, and he just presented it as a way of losing everything so he wouldn't be part of the elite, as if he saw the revolution coming. I feel like there's a little bit of ambiguity there, as sort of Casanova chooses to present himself in that way. Anyway, he loses all his money and they're forced to flee from Paris, and he uses what money that he has to get him, Rocco, and little Giac over to Great Britain.
He's describing all the like differences between England and other places, and he's like, here they piss in the street rather than in the doorways where we piss. And it's like this thing of like, you are all dirty, but you're just doing it in slightly different ways. Just this idea that like sort of we have very modern dialogue, but you always have to be reminded that there is no plumbing. Everything is so nasty.
But what isn't nasty is London's transport system.
Yes, apparently the envy of... Well, I think he's talking about the general... The nationwide transport, because they're not in London yet.
He mentions, he says we're going to London, and London has this incredible carriage system that is the envy of the rest of the country, the rest of the world, and that the carriages are also clean. And obviously, this is RTD doing the same thing, obviously 20 years earlier, well, 10 years earlier. Then did you ever see, and pause whilst Zac Googles the name of the thing he's talking about... Did you ever see Upstart Crow, Louis?
I watched some of it, but I'm not big into like because it's like single camera. That's what it is when it the way it looks like that. Like I was like,
you mean it's multi-camera. What we're watching is single camera.
Yes, it's multi. No, it's weird because single camera is the one where there's more camera shots, but multi-camera is is the one where there's actually fewer. But like it's just
you're on a
they're just
you're on a sound stage.
Yeah.
Yes, with an audience being
That's not important. I've seen a bit of it. That's what I'm saying.
There's a recurring bit where when Shakespeare, those who don't know, Upstart Crow is a sitcom where David Mitchell plays a fictionalized version of Shakespeare, and he comes home to his family and he describes his carriage journey, and it's used to basically be by the writer Ben Elton to be talking metaphorically about the current transport system in the UK. It's basically using carriages as a metaphor for trains, and I think Russell T Davies is doing the same thing here, where we're talking about how clean the London Underground is compared to, say, the New York subway.
Okay, you said a name there that's made a big light bulb, a big alarm bell flash in my head. Ben Elton. I do know that name because he did a documentary about the state of UK railways. And I think it's one of the best, I don't know what you'd call it, like a persuasive it's one of the best documentaries that's trying to persuade you of something, because the way he does it is he sort of sets out as if he's like someone like Michael Portillo, but the guide he's bringing, instead of like a very old travel guide, if you've ever seen like the Michael Portillo shows,
Yes,
it's using a lot of that language, but instead the guide he's using is like the 1994 British Rail like privatization plan, and then he's going places and seeing like, and showing, hey, this is a failure, hey, that is a failure. The thing is, his tour is as you know, as someone from London, he's going to the north of England and being like, this really sucks, this is really bad, this really needs to be fixed. I'm sure you can attest. But it's done so well to sort of use that language to basically say that, you know, trains are great, but they're being failed by the government. And then he talks to a bunch of people and a bunch of experts, including Gareth Dennis, who is a very interesting figure. I definitely think you should look him up, Zac, if you don't know who that is. But yeah. The fact that Ben Elton is using that in Upstart Crow to talk about transport makes me quite happy, because I know he cares about that kind of thing.
He does, yeah. This June 2023 Channel 4 documentary you're referring to.
Yes.
I found it on his Wikipedia page. Yeah, but Russell T Davies did it first in 2005.
Very nice.
So suck it, Ben Elton.
I mean, Ben Elton's been going a while. I'm sure he'll have made some jokes about it in his earlier stuff.
He has, but also I think, even though Russell T Davies didn't really hit it big until he was 40, they're probably the same age.
Yeah, maybe. What year is Ben Elton born? Let's find out.
It would help if his Wikipedia page told me, but it doesn't.
Okay, that's very interesting. It says 1959 on IMDb.
About 4 years older than... Yeah, he's 4 years older than Russell T Davies.
Yeah, just like 4 years. That's all.
Anyway, that little...
Very good. Okay, so they get to well, before they get to London, they're in the docks.
Yes,
wherever they've landed.
They must be. I'm trying to think, where would they? Are they in Portsmouth? Is that still a historic dock?
It's gonna be Portsmouth, or it might be Calais, or possibly New Haven, if New Haven to Dieppe was happening then, because so if you don't know, New Haven to Dieppe, it's if you want to like cycle from like London or walk from London to Paris, it's the ferry route that gets you from like the closest to London to the closest to Paris. So like I wonder if that was like a pretty important passage for anyone traveling between those places, because back then carriages were so slow that you want to be getting on your boat ASAP. But anyway, wherever they are, he passes a figure, and it's funny because like he passes a figure and you see like her like turning around, but she's wearing a hood, and it's a white hood, and they keep cutting to her turning around, and I was like, what is this like Indian soap opera editing?
Well, it's a bit like that TikTok trend where it was sort of the subtle foreshadowing, but in complete reverse.
Oh yeah, the Megalopolis one. Yeah. Go back to the club. That's a different Megalopolis me. No, but yeah, the Megalopolis foreshadowing. Although it's sort of, I think it's because he keeps remembering the hood.
Yes, it's sort of the opposite, yeah.
Because he keeps trying to figure it out. And then, of course, who else? Henriette, it turns out. So he sort of runs back through the dock, runs through past everyone, runs, and manages to see Henriette leaving on a boat with 2 kids. Another one. She has 2 kids now. And they do the like Dr. Donna mouthing thing. Like, what are you doing here? Yeah, and then it's a bit of a mystery as to why. Firstly, he's just missed her, which, you hate to see. And she's wearing white, so her husband isn't dead or anything.
Yeah, we have this massive question of What's she doing in England? Anyway, they set off. They end up in London, and this is when we have this exact parallel to the Parisian court. We're now in the court of George II. There we are.
It's George II, yeah. And so he's basically saying, how's my English? And he says it's good. What about the accent? Oh, the accent's very funny. In Paris, the Italian accent was sexy, but in England, it's funny.
It's funny.
Which I think is probably accurate. He could cut a pizza, you know what I mean?
We have, instead of the French poodle, did you notice what dog we have?
Yes, the bulldog.
The bulldog, we have the English bulldog.
Actually, I should apologise there. I said he could cut a pizza. Back then, Venice and Naples weren't in the same country. So he has yet to cook a pizza, but we will get back to that.
He make her the blinder. That's a reference to Venetian blind.
He blow at a glass.
So we have that joke about the accents, and we have this big.
He wear a mask.
We have this big moment. He rider the gondola, where the guy who's showing Casanova in, who knows what his official title is. He sort of goes, we're a bit extravagant here in Britain, so be prepared if you think our court is a little bit scandalous. And there's this moment where the door opens, and instead of the crazy dancing we had in Paris, everyone's sitting around at tables drinking tea. And this guy's like, if you look over there, this man's wearing this type of breeches, and that woman over there, she's got lemon in her tea. I mean, it's just absolutely scandalous. And I feel like it's quite a good representation of a stereotype about British people.
No, yeah, it is quite funny. Yeah.
And Casanova is led to the Venetian ambassador. And this is supposed to be a draw-dropping moment, because we realise why Henriette was in Manchester, was in the UK.
Yeah.
It's because Grimani is the Venetian ambassador. Done.
Yes. Is Casanova going to get his pardon from Grimani? Absolutely not.
I don't think so.
No. And so what should he do now? Should he go on to the next capital city in his forgiveness tour, let's call it? No, because Grimani, says, you're a no one, you've got nothing, you're not going to be able to waltz into London, do your tricks, and then become rich. That's not going to happen. So now Casanova has to take on a challenge.
Yeah, he becomes sort of the spur to give Casanova.
I wrote Casanova as like the master, because he needs an enemy in Grimani to drive him to do anything. He cannot exist without. He says that like all the best people have like rivals and stuff.
Yeah, it does. It's interesting because he does get read for filth by Grimani. He's basically like, you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and you think you're really impressive, but actually, it's sad and it won't work here. So Casanova has this motivation to sort of prove him wrong.
Yeah.
So he sells his watch to pay for the rent on a townhouse for 2 weeks. So he sort of set himself a challenge of he's got 2 weeks to make a fortune.
Yes.
And you think, how's he going to do it?
Well, he rents out one of his rooms. He sublets. I thought that was quite funny, but I don't know if that would have been as funny in 2005. But just thinking about the housing crisis now, I was like, oh yes, okay, yeah, you're renting a place in London and you're subletting it. Yeah, that figures. But then he rents it out to a prostitute played by Annette Badland.
Well, very, very significantly, he doesn't just rent it out. He makes it very public that he is subletting this room. He puts a notice on his door and says, I'm looking for a single woman to come and sublet my room. And he interviews everyone that comes. So there's a massive line of these quite crazy women. They're sort of implied to be not sort of upper class because one of them slaps his bum.
Yeah.
And he's interviewing each of them. And we only see the interview with Annette Badland's character, Pauline, who pretends to be very upper class, whose husband just died in the Punic Wars, and the Punic Wars being the famous wars between the Romans and the Carthaginians, which, as Casanova points out, had ended over a millennia before the events of this television show.
Yeah, and she said, "Look, he's been away a while," which I mean figures if you've heard of the Odyssey, that thing tends to happen.
So yeah, basically Annette Badland's Pauline gets called out for being a prostitute and is immediately hired as the tenant for the sublet room.
And so this creates a situation where he's an Italian housing a whore, and that's enough to get him into the news. And then because he's in the news, people start sending him free stuff in the hopes he'll talk about him. He is the original influencer.
It's actually kind of crazy how he has predicted the fact that he isn't actually rich. He's not being paid, but he's been invited to so many parties, being given so many products, being given so much attention.
Yeah, he's being given free stuff. That's what makes someone specifically an influencer and not just like any other kind of celebrity. It's quite incredible.
What obviously what would be lovely is if landlords would stop charging rent because you're an influencer. I've yet to see that happen, unless you live in one of those TikTok houses. But who knows? Lord knows how they work.
Yeah. I think the TikTok house is they own it or it's owned by their like talent management company or whatever media company. But basically, with the TikTok house, I think someone does own it with the express purpose of creating entertainment out of it. So if you're looking in the mirror, Zac, wondering what to do, look into let's call it media monetizable property investments.
So Casanova, and it's a shame. Like obviously, Annette Badland is an iconic British actress who simultaneously appeared in the first series of Doctor Who, but I don't just know her from that, of course. I also know her from that Big Finish audio drama where she played a gender-bent version of the... No, she doesn't play. She did a Big Finish, and I think everyone thought she was going to be a female First Doctor. Okay, well, you know what? Palette Cleanser, Big Boys, Inside Number 9. There you go. There's some stuff that she was also in. Yes, there you are. Heartstopper as well. She plays a supportive, I think, grandmother. Which, funnily enough, exactly what she does in Big Boys as well. Maybe she was cast in Heartstopper because of Big Boys. I wouldn't be surprised. But she's been around. Oh yeah, for more than half a century. So you know, yes, she's done quite a few things. But yeah, we don't see much of her, unfortunately. So now that Casanova has his reputation, he's able to waltz around the court and like really make Grimani jealous. And he eventually like starts speaking to Grimani and is like, look, I know all about men. I know if you have problems, just come to me. I can help you with your issues, with your penis. And he says that men are obsessed with the penis, which I think is that Rick and Morty episode about that. But just that it drives him crazy, and he keeps getting on his nerves until he challenges him to a duel, which we're told, according to the king, is completely illegal within the vicinity of London. Completely legal in London. The highest punishment, which is the death penalty, you know, and then one of them asks, and outside the boundaries of London? Oh, fire away. Fire away. And so that's what happens. They go outside of London to have a duel. And it's at the duel that Casanova has this revelation, because they agree to sort of use pistols and shoot one to the death. And Casanova has this realization that Grimani doesn't care if he dies, and Casanova wins, because he's in love with Henriette and she doesn't love him back. And Grimani thought that by forcing her to marry him just to punish Casanova, she'd also eventually fall in love with him and they'd be able to live happily ever after. Yeah, and I think this really works as a revelation, because we all think that he's just married her out of strategy and to spite Casanova. And, you know, because obviously, isn't it like the Victorians invented marrying for love or something like that? Like it's really quite a new invention. I don't even know if the Victorians. But like historically, it was just always about like status and the uniting of families and that kind of strategy. And, you know, obviously there were mistresses and concubines and all that stuff. But our modern understanding of marriage is more modern than most people would accept and believe, because it sounds preposterous to not have that be your priority. Absolutely. But back then it was preposterous to not have status as your priority. You know, that was all that ever mattered. But actually, no, he does love her and he wants her to love him back, but he can't. And so he doesn't care about his life, and he's happy to gamble it for a shot at killing Casanova. So Casanova refuses to fight. Yep, he fires his shot before Grimani is even finished walking. In the air, he fires a shot in the air before he's finished walking. He doesn't kill Grimani in cold blood, but no, he fires his shot to say, hey, I'm not going to shoot you. Grimani threatens to shoot himself in the head, then doesn't, then shoots Casanova in the hand, and then reveals his hidden ace in that they're technically just inside the boundaries of London. They're probably in Enfield or something, and everyone says, "Oh, it's
Biggin Hill
it's
or
not
whatever.
in London," but technically,
Do you know Biggin Hill?
No, do I know Biggin Hill? No, I'm not from the south.
Okay, it's an old so it used to be an airport, or maybe it's still like a bit of an airfield, but basically it's just this part of London where it's like this is all countryside. This is ridiculous. There's a fun bit of London called North Ockendon, which is the only bit of London, or the only substantial bit of London outside the M25. I think there are some bits around where it runs around the M25 that are just outside the M25 bit in London. But North Ockendon is the one place in London where you can like actually live in London but outside the M25. And it's just like a little hamlet. It's really tiny compared to South Ockendon, just outside North Ockendon, just south of North Ockendon, which is not in London. But the borders of London are odd. I watch a lot of Jay Foreman. Have you seen Jay Foreman, Zach?
No.
You're missing out. Let's move on before I keep talking about stuff I learned in Jay Foreman videos.
Grimani declares that they're technically still in London and they've both broken the law, but Grimani has diplomatic immunity, and so Casanova is a fugitive and Grimani can go back to the court having done nothing wrong. It's interesting, the note of diplomatic immunity. Again, I'm not a modern historian, so I don't know when diplomatic immunity became a real thing.
Yeah, but like it might be that like it's like one of the oldest things ever, because sometimes that happens where it turns out that since the first city state, it's always been a thing to like not have your representatives from other places be like tried of crimes and stuff, because otherwise you're declaring war technically. But also it's like, because like nowadays I think how it works is that the embassies are the places where there's that immunity, but
also individuals do have diplomatic immunity. Still, there's been some notable news cases, which is what I immediately thought of.
No, true.
I have just googled it, and you're right. There are ancient Indian epics where the concept of diplomatic immunity can be found, where messengers and diplomats were given immunity.
There we go.
So you're absolutely spot on.
It's a clever plot point. It's a clever trick to play, I have to say. Like,
it is.
Props to Grimani. That's very sneaky on his part.
This is, of course, one of those moments that absolutely did not actually happen at all. As far as we know from Casanova's, there was no pistol duel between Grimani and Casanova, and the infection that Casanova then gets from the bullet wound to a hand is actually, I think, implied to be more of an STI than an infection.
So, the interesting thing is that in the first episode, Edith asks old Casanova, like, did you have a duel with Grimani? Whether or not that's true, it seems like that was certainly a legend, right?
I don't know.
Because if there's all these legends around this guy, it's hard to sort of figure out when something became a legend, when people started saying it. And I'm wondering, because you think, if you have a rival at this time, you'd expect a duel at some point. That's what always happens. It's like Hamilton or whatever. And so, Edith was like, ooh, did you have a duel? When did you duel Romani? And we eventually do get to that. So it's interesting to find out that didn't happen, because that's like the one plot point that has actually been kind of foreshadowed in episode 1.
Yes, exactly. And I fear that it is all completely fictionalized. But there we are, to sort of add that drama for Casanova's motivation towards Henriette.
Yes.
But we're not here to discuss the historicity of the story.
No.
This isn't the rest of history.
But now they've left Britain. They're getting out of here ASAP.
They're on their way to Poland. That was their next stop.
Yeah, to Poland. Yeah, do you want to know a fun fact?
Of course.
Okay, so my mum, she's fluent in English, but something that's always a bit tricky is heteronyms, which is when two words are spelt the same but pronounced differently based on the meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so she does have a tendency to pronounce Polish as Polish. So she'll say, oh yes, for the Polish shop.
It's been many, I believe that is many the clue to a riddle or a joke. Polish. I'm actually part Polish. An example of one of those Jews whose family moved from Eastern Europe to Western Europe at the turn of the 19th to 20th century. So I have my Polish heritage.
19th or 20th? Which one?
I mean the turn from the 19th to the 20th.
Okay, yeah.
That's what I mean.
The turn of the 20th century,
yeah, exactly. I can never remember when you say the turn of, if it's the one you're going into, the one you're leaving. So that's why I felt the need to say both, to imply a journey from towards.
Okay.
So they're on the way to Poland, my ancestral land, when they get kicked out of their carriage because they can't afford it, and they end up in this lodging house, which Rocco still can't afford. They're penniless. Casanova seems to be dying. He's coated in blood. He's infected. And this mysterious woman comes along. And my first thought, this is really embarrassing.
She comes just in time because, like, Rocco is, like, arguing with the kind of a tavern owner, like, saying, like, no, I can't move him. And he's like, if you want to stay an extra night, you got to pay now. So she comes in just in the nick of time to sort of rescue him. It's very odd.
And I sort of thought to myself, oh my God, it's Florence Nightingale. And then realised, no, it's not Florence Nightingale. It's just a random woman who's implied to have medical knowledge. But her involvement is mysterious. Rocco saying, I can't pay you. She seems to ignore all of this. She won't answer where she comes from. And she takes them to this sort of abandoned mansion house where apparently the owner died in war, and the lawyers are trying to figure out who owns it. So the caretaker isn't coming for a month. So essentially they take him to this abandoned manor house where she's able to sort of heal him, and they stay until he's better. And there's some interesting little tidbits that we get whilst we're here that I want to talk about. We get my favourite bit of Rocco characterization, and we noted last time about how Rocco is such an underused character, and I wonder if things were potentially on the cutting room floor, or if just the script didn't give much time to Rocco because there's so much going on in the show. All the furniture's covered in sheets because the house has been abandoned, and Rocco picks up one of the sheets and sort of wears it like a coat. And you sort of get this sense of Rocco's always wanted to be someone and do something and sort of climb the ranks. And he is kind of denied this and not given this status. And I think maybe that's the one bit of moment where we see his desires. And I think it's quite tragic that, spoiler alert, he doesn't get that. We also see Giac in the same moment staring at a vase in the house, knocking it over, and then going to see his father when he's better and squeezing his shocked hand and causing him a lot of pain. So we're getting further clues as to where the characterization of Giac is going, and it's not looking good.
Yeah.
We then get the shocking twist. Louis, wasn't it the most shocking twist you've ever seen in the history of television ever? Because it was to me. I would never in a million years have guessed that this mysterious woman who wouldn't tell anyone where she came from was employed by Henriette.
Yes, and this is revealed with a scene where, just as Casanova has gotten better, but he's still like pretty weak, he's kind of running over to try and catch the nurse before she leaves and see who her employer is, and eventually he sees through a carriage window there's Henriette, and it's like Henriette came, and this is something that clearly sticks with old Casanova, because he thinks that because she saved his life in Saxony, which I'm wondering how did this happen? How was she able to find him in Saxony when he'd been kicked out because he ran out of money on the way to Poland? She wasn't just waiting in Gdansk, when is this guy showing up? The fact that she was able to know where he is and then save him, and because he was so close to sort of dying on the street. Quite incredible scene, but somehow he did work.
Absolutely.
Because I'm guessing surely this is not something that actually happened, or
well, no, I don't think the character of Henriette isn't a real character.
Oh,
as far as I'm aware.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Oh wait, no, she died. Sorry, I believe she was real, but it's a pseudonym. And there wasn't actually a person called Henriette, but he uses that pseudonym in his...
Because Grimani was real, and do we know who his wife was?
Well, Grimani supposedly was actually Casanova's birth father. The show paints Grimani as a parallel contemporary of Casanova's, but actually he was a generation above him, I believe.
Okay.
And was a former patron of his, and at one point in his biography, Casanova claims that Grimani was his true father.
Wow. That is a bombshell.
Yeah, there's a bigger bombshell than this woman being employed by Henriette. Let's just say that. I was not shocked, to say the least.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting character moment.
Yeah. But now, before we can go any further with the story of young Casanova, we get kind of the most important scene between Edith and old Casanova, because so far this episode, they have just been like, it has just been, they're talking about the story, occasionally it cuts to them, discussing, how real is this? Does this really happen? But now we actually get the drama between them, which is that he's claiming that Edith has fallen for him, and then she's like, no, ew. But also she's like, I don't want to be a girl anymore. Like, I want to actually like know what's out there in the world and how to deal with men. Eventually, Casanova just like pushes her away. It's quite an uncomfortable scene because it's like, my man, you are very old. You're an old man. And he's insisting that, no, I have seduced you. And it's like, ugh.
It's an interesting one because I follow the train of thought. Casanova says to her, you know, I've seduced you. You know, my reputation is that I could seduce. I had so many maids in my bedroom, and here you are, a maid in my bedroom. And Edith says, well, I now know the real you. And he says, yes, but you didn't when you came to me. And that's the moment where she reveals that she doesn't want to be seen as a girl. She doesn't want to sort of have this virginity, and she doesn't want to lose it with a contemporary boy, as in a boy her own age, because she's scared of someone laughing at her. And actually, this Casanova she's come to know, she wants to trust, and thinks, oh, he could do it. And then he sort of laughs at her and kicks her out. There's lots going on there, and it's sort of hard to sort of pick out and describe, because at the one hand, I feel like she sort of has sort of developed these sort of feelings towards him, but I don't know if he's manipulated her or if these feelings are. She definitely sort of has a soft spot and an affection for him. I don't know. It was an interesting, complicated little thing going on.
It's very odd, but this falling out means that now, like, Edith kind of becomes like all the other staff there, and when you can tell like quite a bit of time has passed, because now there's like a brand new servant girl who's there asking about the old guy in the tower with the books, and she says, don't talk to him, he's no good, he's trouble. And so she's like, okay, that's fine, that's less trouble for me. But it's interesting that now Edith has become like all the others in just wanting to just get her head down and just do the work and not engage with the inhabitants of this castle. But the new girl does bring down his chamber pot, and she can see that there's blood in there, and so she thinks, oh no, he must be dying. And then immediately her heart changes there. She does go up to see him. And this is kind of where we begin the kind of the part 2 of this episode, because now it's this is how Casanova's story kind of comes to a close, and really about how everything kind of falls apart, because he's always been able to get out of scrapes, but we're coming to the last few scrapes that are gonna finally like knock over his Jenga tower, let's say, you know, if that's a good metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The first one is that Rocco dies quite suddenly. So Edith goes up to ask Casanova about how his story ends, and he starts by saying that Rocco dies. And I'm just going to tell you what the line is. It's, he caught a cold and was dead in 6 days, buried in some little town that no one's heard of. That must be what we think it is, right? Like, that must be an allusion to what we think it is, right? If Russell T Davies is writing this.
You've lost me.
Okay, so the thing is, he dies of a cold. So Casanova survives like being shot and getting a fever and all this stuff, and Rocco dies of a cold.
Right, yes, yeah, I'm with you. Right, I'm with you. Yeah.
Who else was dying of colds and then being buried in the random little towns where they grew up instead of the places they're actually living at that point?
Yes, absolutely. I didn't see that. I see. So, yeah.
That's fine, but when I saw it, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, holy fucking shit.
Yeah.
This is an allusion to the AIDS crisis. Oh my God.
And interestingly, building on that, then the feelings that Casanova has when he says about him surviving being shot, there's all that survivor's guilt. And I've seen a lot of people write about survivor's guilt being a common theme in Russell T Davies' writing because of the fact that he's one of the few gay men of his generation to survive the crisis.
Certainly. But then he just keeps going. He just keeps traveling around Europe, eventually arriving in Naples with his son. And at this point, his son is like a young adult now.
Yeah.
Played by none other than, the name just slipped my mind, Tom Burke, that's it. Who was in that one episode of The Crown. So there you go. Because there's a line later on where old Casanova says of Rocco, he died, I never even stopped, kept going. At this point, the Doctor Who parallels are getting absolutely ridiculous. Who else is that like? And also, like, that's, you could say, well, that's kind of like with Rose, or not really. He was pretty sad about Rose, but certainly in the anniversary specials last year, that seems to. So it's funny that sure, fine, whatever. This show seemed to predict the 10th Doctor because the 10th Doctor was based on the character David Tennant played in this show. But the fact that this line was probably more aptly predicting the 14th Doctor, that's pretty insane. Please confirm my ramblings here. I agree. No, good. I agree with you. Because I found that bit pretty mad, just as someone watching it at this specific point in time.
We see after the death of Rocco. That's called Rocco.
After the death of Rocco's basilisk,
we see the advent of David Tennant to just outside of Mount Vesuvius. Is it Series 4, Episode 2 of Doctor Who?
It is Series 4, Episode 2 of Doctor Who. You remember correctly, Zac, because you know how every series, every new companion has the meeting episode, the trip to the future, and the trip to the past. In this series, it was trip to the past, then the future. And of course, that trip to the past was Pompeii.
But this is not the AD 79 eruption. This is the eruption a millennia later. We come to a Naples drowning in sulfur.
And yeah, and finally, we can cook at a pizza because we're in Naples, yeah. It's quite fascinating because Naples is a city that's very much influenced by its precarity, its proximity to a volcano. And so when we enter the court of Naples, everyone looks like a cross between like The Cure and Hot Topic if it was like the 1700s. Watching it, I was really like, oh wow, all my friends are seen.
To be fair, it didn't even feel like the 1700s to me. We could have been in the late 20th century.
Yeah, they're just blaring the Smiths in the background.
Yeah, exactly.
For double-decker bus. Yeah.
And we just we were asking ourselves, where are we? What are we doing here in Naples? Why have we been invited into this court? What's going on? And we discover that this is actually not...
Oh, yes, because a mysterious woman
yeah.
beckons them to come over to follow them because they're trying to get into any houses while the eruption's happening, and she's like drawing them in, and I'm quite excited because I called it that this was Bellino's daughter.
Yes.
Well, because when we see Bellino in Paris, we do see her with a toddler, so not too hard to guess, but you know, then we see Bellino and it's like, okay.
Yeah, this is technically Bellino's court. She is now at the absolute height of her fame.
Yes.
She's married, rich. He's died, so she's inherited all of this. She wants for literally nothing. She lives the most extravagant life.
She has nothing left to want.
Exactly.
That's kind of destroyed her brain a bit. And now she lives for the fact that like they're all going to die and that this could be wiped out any moment. And it's like how in Britain, if you're rich enough, you'll go skiing a lot because there's no danger in your life. But if you're not that rich, then there's enough danger in your life. Like, I am not going skiing. Oh my God, that sounds so dangerous, you know?
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. It's that it's like at the end of A Good Place when they like there's no stakes and so everyone becomes a zombie. It's really because I am fascinated by the idea of hedonism or however you want to say it. And I think that's something that Queer as Folk explored a lot, and so I like seeing it explored in stuff, and so I like that that theme has come back in Casanova. I was very excited by that.
Bellino represents a foil to Casanova in that regard, because we're shown the life that he could be having, in the sense that if he just stuck in one place and just sort of stuck, and
if he never went to jail.
Yeah, exactly. And if he got Henriette, but by the fact that he never got that thing that he wanted, he was always sort of searching for something more. And there's sort of a sense that, is Bellino jealous of that a little bit?
Oh, I think she is. But I think it's for like, whatever you get, the grass is always greener on the other side.
Casanova, on the other hand, and this is the most telling portrayal of Casanova, this is where, as I mentioned earlier, we see the real Casanova. We see who he is, because we think of him as this hedonistic character, and obviously his name now is synonymous with sexual hedonism. He's not a hedonist, because he looks at this world and sort of, he's disgusted by it, and the ultimate sort of kick in the teeth is when Bellino reveals to him that this girl that we realised was her daughter,
yes, Leonilda,
is in fact also Casanova's daughter.
Yes. So her husband, who apparently was a very lovely man, because he raised her illegitimate child as his own. And of course, we when we see her, we think, oh, okay, she must be Bellino's husband's. That's fine. That's cool. But it turns out that she's Casanova's. But already earlier, we saw that young Giac and Leonilda were hitting it off. And the moment she said that, in my head, I was like, no. But it takes a bit longer for Casanova to figure this out.
Yes.
He doesn't clock it straight away, but then eventually he's like, oh, but, I'm just thinking, like, because, like, my son is like me, so maybe I should tell him. And it's like, why are you not freaking out, Casanova? This is... You need to be sprinting out of there right now, but he's a bit more relaxed about it, until Bellino says, oh, but anything goes. That's great, isn't it? And like, once he realizes that she doesn't care about her daughter committing incest, he realizes that, oh my God, what if my son commits incest? And
that's where we see that he's not just about, he has sort of these sort of societal norms, and he's not about crossing boundaries for the sake of crossing boundaries like Bellino has come to be. And so he goes, and to sort of inform Giac that he's about to sleep with his sister. And we find that Giac knows that he's been told, and he's going to go through with it. And this is the moment where he says to his father, you showed me the kind of father you would be, the kind of man who just takes what he wants when he wants, and should always be heartless and never give his heart away because love is so damaging. And he's completely misinterpreted what it means to be Casanova, and bought into this idea of Casanova that sort of has captured the public imagination and doesn't see the real thing, and says, oh, I'm just going to go on with it. And you know what, Dad? You should actually come and join in if you like. And
when he said, do you want to join in? I did think, to be fair, Casanova did fuck two sisters at once. So, like, glass houses, I guess.
I mean, there is also, you might end up cutting this out. I did see an interview with a OnlyFans, of one of, I think, was it Bonnie Blue, a famous OnlyFans star, who was asked in an interview on a podcast, would you sleep with a father and son? And she was like, yeah. She was like, if your paternal bond is that strong that you can do that together, I'm so pro that. And the interviewer was like, maybe we're just operating on these different wavelengths, but that doesn't sound right to me. And obviously Casanova agreed with the podcast host there. He was like, that's not for me. I'm going to leave Naples now. Goodbye. I'm never going to speak to my son again.
Yeah, it's wild, but like, this is how we say goodbye to young Giac.
Yes.
And then old Casanova says to Edith that he actually has like so many bastard children who are all going around having sex with everyone, and then like using his name as like they're like a new Casanova. And I thought that was so interesting, because it's like, it turns out we've been following the one illegitimate child that he took with him around Europe, but everyone who knows who their father is but hasn't really met him just sort of begins to embody the legend rather than getting to know the actual guy. And it turns out that his own son he was raising, there was still that distance, and so he is still bought into the legend rather than and yeah. And I mean, like, the bit where Bellino says like, we're all going to die, I was like, okay, right, this is a death cult. You need to get out of there. I mean, I guess they're not going to all do it at once, but so I guess it's not death, but it's certainly like certainly not a good place, and it is kind of sad that he gave Bellino this sort of boost to achieve whatever she wanted, and now she's not in the best place. And obviously there's a volcano, but I think it's implied that no one actually like died that day, because he says that like he doesn't know where his son is, he could be anywhere. And so just the fact that this is kind of how it how he lost touch is really quite surprising.
But does have a meaningful resolution, albeit tragic, to the character, and shows the journey he's had throughout the episode. So I feel satisfied by it and thought it was really effective.
No, definitely. I think this is definitely sort of, because this is like a tragedy, and so this is the point where there's no redeeming him, and like this is where it's really over for Casanova, and at this point he does decide to fake his death in like so many different places and so many different ways.
Yeah.
Because like this is the point where he's like, Giac becomes like a mirror to older Casanova.
Yeah.
And he sees that this person I've created, this image that isn't me, that needs to die, and so that's why he kills Casanova. And then I guess through the dialogue of old Casanova, it's implied that shortly after that he went to the castle where he is now, and he's been there ever since.
Yes, he's been hiding away, exiling himself, he says, and that sort of, he describes Naples as the episode of his life that inspired him to sort of reach that epilogue that he's currently in.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the end of him telling Edith these stories, and he decides that he's going to burn all his writing and burn history, and she stops him because it's the only record of the truth of the real Casanova, and not the one that everyone thinks he is. Exactly,
but also because he thinks that if Henriette is still out there, then he still has a chance, and so he doesn't need to like wallow in this kind of misery of writing his true story and all that stuff. And so how she stops him from burning the burning all his writing is saying that the one person you love more than Henriette is this guy, and then we get like a dreamy kind of love montage, but for young Casanova. And so I just wrote that like old Casanova ex young Casanova was the real OTP all along. There's some fanfic for you.
Absolutely. But then at this moment, Casanova collapses, because as we've mentioned before, there was piss in his blood. There was blood in his piss. I don't know, there isn't any piss in his blood.
I mean, it could have been both.
It could be.
We'd have to let some to find out about the blood side, but it could be both.
Yeah, we know that he's unwell and he collapses.
Actually, no. Technically, there is always piss in your blood because piss is drawn directly from the blood, and it has to travel through the blood to get to the bladder. So there is always piss in your blood. Fun fact, kids.
That's more than I needed to know. Thank you, Lou.
STEM communicator. Biology facts for y'all.
And Edith ends up taking care of Casanova, and she has the letter that has arrived in reply to Casanova's letter to Henriette, and she decides at this point to read it. And we find out it's actually a letter from Henriette's daughter, and Henriette had sadly died 6 months earlier, but spoke of Casanova often and never stopped looking for him because she didn't believe the rumours that he had died. And Edith takes the opportunity to burn the letter. She doesn't want Casanova to read it. And she tells Casanova, who's in his sick bed, as soon as Casanova gets better, she'll leave and go and have her own adventures and live her own life, because there's no point of her sat waiting around. And it's nice that she's been inspired by the story and that she's had her own journey.
And she tells him that Henriette is coming, but she even goes as far to sort of make up her own story and say, well, I was sent by Henriette to look after you, because she never believed any of those rumours. And because that's what she said, that's what Henriette's daughter did say in the letter, was that my mother never believed any of the rumours, she never stopped looking for you. And so because Edith can say that to Casanova, he believes that she must know Henriette because of the letter, which and so it's very emotional because now she's telling him the story. Now she's creating the legend of herself that, she was sent from a higher purpose, and not just the fact that, random people cross paths and it's all up to chance, like running into Henriette in Britain, complete chance there, but actually that there was some greater purpose when there isn't really, but you create the story of a greater purpose, and that comforts Casanova, and so he can die in not too much pain, I guess. It's very sad.
Yeah, it is very sad. But his last act is to smile as Edith says to him, she's coming closer, and then she's here. She says to him that Henriette's here just as he dies. And then the last thing we see is a young Casanova and Henriette dancing in the streets of Venice. And I like to imagine that's them in heaven, finally reunited.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Wow, I'm just taking a moment to think about it.
I know. And then something else happens after this. His skin starts glowing yellow, and he turns into Matt Smith. But that's a story for another time.
I was genuinely confused. I was like, the credits rolled? I don't know what you're referring to. Yes, no. This is the story of what happened if the 10th Doctor had actually stayed with Madame de Pompadour.
Yeah.
Sorry, I need to get my Doctor Who brain rot out of my brain. Yeah, wow. What a story.
Well, it's funny, actually, you mention that, because I think, there's 11th Doctor stories where he will spend years with someone and then return back to the ponds the same day because he's a time traveller.
Yes.
And it's quite funny that, the 11th Doctor was pretty good at, doing this sort of thing, but the 10th Doctor was doomed to always, be out of reach from anyone.
Yes.
Because of the timey-wimey stuff.
Bless him.
Yeah, and clearly we know where he got that from. The way that Casanova was also out of reach from all of this stuff, and I mean, it does make you think of about the human experience and the fact that we are sort of confined to one progression of chapters, and you've just gotta do as much as you can with it,
Very wisely.
But I think he did a lot. I think he did. I think he got around.
I think
as much as you could back then, because it was hard to get around back then.
I was going to say
they didn't have trains or planes.
That's the understatement of the millennium. He definitely got around.
But because he was always pursuing that return to Venice, it sort of maybe prevented him from living in the moment.
Maybe.
Whenever he did a scheme, it was always just to get enough money to move on and get the forgiveness somewhere else and then return, but never quite happened.
Yeah, it's a tragic.
I think it's pretty tragic. I don't.
It's the lens that RTD decides to show the story through.
Yeah.
I think what shines through is I think there was also a lot of joy and excitement there as well.
Yeah.
It's an interesting interpretation of Casanova's life.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll say that much. But that's it. That's Casanova.
Yeah.
I will certainly say my wrapping up thought is, watching this, I was kind of like, this is one of the weaker things we've watched from Russell T Davies. It doesn't quite have the same originality that I could come to expect from RTD so far. I come back to Bob and Rose as the gold standard of the best RTD can be in telling these really compelling human stories. But actually, having discussed it today with you, Louis, I'm kind of going, actually, there was a lot of originality in the way it was put together and what they did with a low budget from a production standpoint to tell the story. And it'd be interesting maybe to go away and watch the 2005 film starring Heath Ledger as Casanova in comparison to see how the two things stand up together. So those are my sort of final closing thoughts.
And so I think that brings to a close kind of phase one of the Davies on Davies podcast. Well, almost actually, because so before Doctor Who and after Queer as Folk, RTD did write something else that we haven't covered, which was one episode of Linda Green, which is a sitcom starring Lisa Tarbuck. We might watch that for a bonus episode, but I'm having a really hard time finding it anywhere. It was on UK TV Play, and now only season 2 is on UK TV Play, and I'm like, why is it gone? Oh, but yeah, hopefully we'll cover that next time. So if you want to follow us, you can follow us on Instagram at DavisOnDavis. You can follow us on Blue Sky at ondavis.bluesky.social. Let me just double check that. Do you know about Blue Sky, Zach?
I know what Blue Sky is, but I've decided not to migrate. I've just deleted my Twitter. I've deleted my X account, and I will not be migrating over to Blue Sky.
Okay, I'm having fun with it, at least for the moment. So it's on Davis, all one word, .bluesky.social or .bsky.social. I also have an account at louisoa.bsky.social. I've started writing more on my blog, so if you don't have Blue Sky, you can just follow the blog louisonair.wordpress.com. I think that's everything I have to promote. But Zach, do you have anything to promote?
I would like to promote that people go and see Wicked in the cinema, and if you want to know more about Wicked, go to the Wicked's website, but do not go to www.wicked.com.
Oh my god, yes.
Go to www.wickedmovie.com. For crying out loud. Don't let your children go to wicked.com.
God, that was funny when I saw that. Yeah.
Yes,
I love that. Well, great. We'll see you next time.
See everyone next episode.